My dear people of Southern Cameroons, my dear people of Ambazonia, accept revolutionary greetings from me, John Ba Akuro. Today is Sunday, and today is June 6th, in the year 2021. My people, I am buoyed to come and talk this day. Although we have so much that we really have to talk about, but today my focus will be on a 4 minute broadcast I followed of George Ewane of CRTV in Yaoundé on a program whose history is thick and strong, a program that has seen some of the best in journalism in Cameroon calling, a program that today has been so watered down that it has become simply a shadow of itself. That is what has brought me here, and I'm actually coming here today to talk about that particular outing. But before I get there, let me remind all and sundry that our attention will be focused this Monday, June 7, on the United Nations Security Council, where the members of or officials of UNOCA from Central Africa will be presenting the peace and security situation in Central Africa. And of course, it is expected that they would definitely be talking about the situation in the southern Cameroons. And so we should pay a lot of attention on this. And this session is coming at a time that some 20 women in the Cameroons, at the head of whom Ms. Kawala issued a letter to the United Nations Security Council calling on that organ of the UN, and that is the most powerful organ of the UN, to make a clear-cut statement on the situation in the southern Cameroons. The same women also wrote to the International Monetary Fund forbidding the body, calling on that body to stop giving money to La République du Cameroun for a number of reasons. So, that is the surrounding environment of the meeting of the UN Security Council that will be taking place tomorrow, and during which, that is this Monday, June 7, and during which, of course, there's going to be inevitably talk about the situation in the southern Cameroons. So, that said, I like to settle on what I really came today to talk about, and it's not going to be a long discussion. I followed George Ewane this Sunday, June 6, talk on Cameroon calling. I'm convinced that the discourse by George Ewane today, or that article that he presented on Cameroon calling, certainly provoked the late George Mbutani, one of the founders of this wonderful program, to turn in his grave. It must have provoked late Epsingum to turn in his grave. It must have provoked all those people who sacrificed enormously to get that program, to give it the stature it deserved, to make that program the window of all the downtrodden people of the Cameroons, to make it the program which became known as the voice of the voiceless, where the real concerns of the people were brought up in total bravery. My people of the southern Cameroons, when I listened, I shook my head. I said, this is no longer Cameroon calling. This is no longer what a lot of people in the southern Cameroons refer to as the first mass, or as the first service. Nobody left for church without listening to Cameroon calling religiously from start to end. If you want to recall, this is that program that buoyed a lady called Animbo Monjo to prominence, because on this program, people defied the odds. People kept aside all sorts of thoughts about career growth. People kept aside all sorts of thoughts about, favoritism from one member of government or the other, and faced journalism and looked at the system eyeball to eyeball and told them exactly what was wrong to the benefit of the wider society. This takes me to wanting to let us understand once more what journalism is all about. Because what I followed the poet, George Ewane, present today had nothing completely to do with journalism, where he spent his time trying to make victims look like the aggressors, where he spent his time trying to make people who manage even to speak out, people who manage to still have consciences, to look like they were accomplices of what he and the system he has become a prisoner to very easily describe as the apostles of bad, of doom. For the records, the American Press Institute says journalism, or it says the purpose of journalism is thus to provide citizens with the information they need to make the best possible decisions about their lives, their communities, their societies, and their governments. And so, when we transform a media house which is run on the taxpayers' money into what Shandong called the footstools or the drum of one man and a system, then you begin to understand that there is no more journalism being practiced in this place. My people, I guess a veiled reference was to the fact that this priest in Kumbo, who has faced problems on both sides of the political divide, but who courageously continued to stand on the side of the truth, and who is now wallowing in uncertainty, that my colleague of yesterday comes out to want to push the unfortunate narrative that by speaking the truth, you are standing against the government. That by speaking the truth, you are standing against what is right. That by speaking the truth, you should be called names. Names I won't want to mention within the framework of this program. My people, I like to say sometimes that cowardice is not only the inability of someone to look at wrong and call it wrong. Cowardice is also when someone knows the truth but decides to say the opposite, even if it is for pecuniary gains. But cowardice is generally described as a trait wherein excessive fear prevents an individual from taking a risk or facing danger. It is the opposite of courage. But let me say this very clearly. In this case, I don't absolutely see it as cowardice. I see it as looking at what do I benefit now? How much grounds do I have to cover in this system while there is still time? What new position can I aspire to by sacrificing the same people who listen to me every day in the pious hope that I can use the pulpit that I have, that I can use the microphone to raise their concerns and bring about change, the kind of change that they require. Listen, the late President Thomas Jefferson said this about the press: were it left to me to decide whether we should have a government without newspapers or newspapers without a government, I should not hesitate a moment to prefer the latter. Now, look at this very carefully. This statement by the late US president, way back 1743 to 1826, that's when he lived, was a way of presenting, of indicating how important the press is in bringing about change in our society. How important the press is in holding people in authority accountable. How important the press is in helping the people in the various communities in making informed decisions. He didn't just end there. The late President Thomas Jefferson, he said something more. He said the spirit of resistance to government is so valuable on certain occasions that I wish it to be always kept alive. This is specifically the quote I want to share with my colleague of yesterday, the poet George Ewane, and with all others who serve today at CITV and Cameroon Tribune. Listen, we all know that when George quotes the late Martin Luther King Jr., who tells us that what we will remember most will be the silence of those whose voice could make a difference. He simply is pointing that finger to himself and to those of them who are seated and watching exactly what is happening in southern Cameroon without complaint. When I listened to Mr. Ewane this morning, I thought he was going to try to call the attention of the Prime Minister John Gute to the plight of the local palm farmers in his own local government area of origin, in Ekondo Titi, where they went out and burnt down whole oil mills for about every businessman or woman in Ekondo Titi subdivision for no good reason. These are investments people have made over the years. These are their lives' investments. These are the local people who even respected a decision by a colonial administration which is contrary to good reason, asking them to shut down their businesses in order to prosper a government outfit palm oil plantations. These people respected. They shut down their businesses. They shut down their mills. They were not milling. Yet, Mr. Ewane, Mr. John Gute, and the government of Mr. Paul Biya sent troops to go there and bring down these mills. They reduce the investments of all of these people to ashes. What becomes of these people? Where are their livelihoods? They will turn around and tell them, send their children to school. With what? Yet, this gentleman who went to school to learn how to stand for the people comes and makes as if that didn't happen. I thought you'd be wondering what the innocent children, women, and pregnant woman in Gabu did to deserve the carnage that they had. No, George didn't see that. I was wondering, when he talked about projects, decisions coming out of the so-called Grand National Dialogue, and then he mentioned the reconstruction of roads inside metropolitan Bamenda and others. And I asked myself, if the road between Babaju and Bamenda has been abandoned for decades, to the point where it is virtually impassable, was even at one point completely cut off, and you go to build wonderful roads inside the city, how do people get there? By helicopter? By aircraft? Where has reason gone to? It is this kind of thoughts, it is this kind of journalism practice that I'll call mercenary journalism that pushed the German publicist Paul Seth way back, over 200 years ago, to say of press freedom that press freedom is the freedom of 200 rich people to propagate their ideas, to express themselves. And because journalists are not rich, they are not free either. It is this kind of practice that pushed the German publicist Paul Seth to make this kind of assertion. How many of them are in Cameroon? Are there up to 300 rich people? No. It is because of the power of their pens. The power of the money they swindle from government coffers here and there that will push people whose vocation, whose profession it is to use the public media and cry out for the downtrodden, who will now go and use it to try and defend the power and mighty, the powerful and mighty. This is regrettable. Someone will say, but couldn't you just let it go? No, I can't be silent. I can't be silent because this is a program where a good lot of us sat on Sunday after Sunday. I recall virtually every Sunday after this program, we were sure to be summoned to explain why we were standing on the side of the people. My dear people, I have this little anecdote. It may last about 1 minute 30 seconds because I'm going to abridge it. In 2008, and on the 17th of May, we recorded an edition of Cameroon Calling. The presenter of that program was Samson Websi Ngango. After that program, because on that program, we questioned this whole notion of celebration of so-called national unity on May 20. We asked the significance and importance of May 20. We wanted to know what May 20 stood for if the country were going the direction it was going. We wanted to know what May 20 stood for if the people of the southern Cameroons were more and more reduced to second-class citizens to the point where they never even had that zeal to think that they belonged. We wondered what May 20 was for. Unexpectedly after that program, we were summoned by Mr. Alain Belibi. We were queried and eventually were let to go. So we went and had our usual relaxation, receiving calls from concerned Southern Cameroonians from here and there asking after our safety. And when we parted, I went home and I was trying to take a nap. Few minutes after, Samson Websi gave me a call. John, where are you? So I'm taking a nap. He said, I've run into problems here at Madagascar with soldiers and the gendarmes. I said, what is it? He said, it's very complicated. I've been dragged to the gendarmerie in Madagascar, but I've called Josh Kilong, my brother and friend, Josh Kilong, whose canine have been rendered blunt, as I understand. And so, he said Josh Kilong was on his way. I said, okay. I fell back asleep. Seconds after my phone, a few minutes after my phone rang again. He said, hey, John. I said, yes, so what's the situation? Has Josh arrived and what's happening? He said, Josh has just arrived and he has already been locked up. I was like, oh my goodness. I can't understand what's happening here. But I was feeling so sleepy, I fell again asleep. So a few seconds after, but even my sleep, I was like, hey, wait a minute, what's happening here? Are they going to come after me here? So I picked my phone, I called Muke Edwin Kinzeka. I said, do you know what has happened? There's trouble in Madagascar. And so what do? We said, rather than run away, we won't be cowards. We go face it. And so we made calls. Moki and I met at Carrefour Billy and drove straight to Madagascar. And when we got there, Josh Kilong was effectively locked up. And we all stretched our hands and said, please open that cell, open that dungeon. All of us are sailing in because it is all for one and one for all. We are standing for freedom and nothing's going to stand on our way. Why do I tell the story? Because I remember that eventually, when with all the noise and all the commotion and calls from the various diplomatic missions at the presidency of the Republic and everything, and everyone was finally let go, Harry Macaulay felt so angry and said these words, John, you people made me to feel ashamed. And you people are causing me to eventually have to lie in the future. I will have to be forced to tell my son that I was also there with you people, whereas I wasn't. Because it is going to be horrible for them to imagine that their father might have chickened away when he needed to be there to face the bull by the horns, when he needed to be there to stand up for the truth and stand up for the people. This is no longer Cameroon Calling. Charlatanism has taken over today. This is no longer Cameroon Calling we are talking about. No. What we now hear on that program is what my Francophone colleague friends will call griotism. Today, it has become another program for praise singing. My people, I like us to continue to tap from those who tell us better than we often think. It is Tony Robbins who says it takes no guts to be skeptical. It takes guts to believe, to put yourself on the line, to take action and risk failure and ultimately succeed. This is why, on a daily basis, I continue to doff my heart to all those Southern Cameroonians who, against all odds, who against all difficulties, who with all the risk, facing death every second, every minute, continue to rise and say we will be making a mistake, to stay silent when we ought to speak. My dear people, this is why I continue to say we have to continue to fight on by all peaceful means possible until we bring that change that is needed for the people of the Southern Cameroons, until we get the chains off our hands and off our feet, until we release the Southern Cameroons from the colonial grip of La République du Cameroon. I know it is sometimes hard for people who believe in facility, who believe in having things easily, to imagine that it could be better somewhere apart from the little crumbs that they are receiving and feeling satisfied and happy about. Listen, my dear people of the Southern Cameroons, I say this always, that we should search for the good in others in order to appreciate them. Search for the weaknesses within ourselves in order to improve them. Listen, I want to point out at this specific juncture that the good I see in people like these ones I've just referred to is that they remind us on a daily basis why we have to keep fighting. They remind us on a daily basis why we have to keep stomping for freedom. They remind us on a daily basis why we must continue to sacrifice and sacrifice and sacrifice until that day where we will stand all of us and shout, free, free, free at last. We are free. Let us take the opportunity of such excesses from those I call either mercantilist journalists or mercenary journalists to search within ourselves for the weaknesses we have that they generally explore to try and delay our march towards freedom so that we can make our journey easier, seamless, and less difficult. My people of the Southern Cameroons, I want to stop at this juncture. But before I go, let me congratulate each and every one of us that continue to stand strong and tall and say it is better to fight and die for a people than live and swim in illicit wealth at the expense of the same people. Let us keep the flame of our struggle for freedom alive. Let us continue to sacrifice. Our sacrifices will never go in vain. Happy Sunday.